Hi, in a recent video I showed you how to make this fabric book cover for this notepad, and I also mentioned that I'd made one in another fabric and I'd put wadding or batting in this one. So in the last video I showed you how to make it without any wadding, and I had a question asking me where you put the wadding in relation to sandwiching the fabric layers together. So in this video I thought I'd make another book cover for the same notepad, but this time using some wadding. So I'm going to take this book out of here, and basically I also went over how to measure the book and everything, so I'll put information in this video referring to the video I did recently, and then you can go and have a look. But just to recap quickly, basically you need some kind of a fabric ruler. You need to take your notebook, no matter what size it is, and you need to measure from the edge of the front cover round over the spine and to the back. You don't go over the thickness of the book, just edge to edge, and you take that measurement. Now in my case that measurement for this book was 12 6/8, and I added 1 1/4 inch to that measurement. Then you take the measurement for the book cover again from top to bottom of the front cover, and again this measurement on mine was 8 2/8, so again I added 1 1/4. So the fabric that I need to cut for that particular book ends up being 14 inches wide by 9.5 inches high, and for that you need a piece of fabric for your outer cover, you need a piece of fabric for your lining that's exactly the same size, and then for your flaps that also become pockets, I took the width of the fabric and cut it in half. So I then took another piece of fabric, 14 inches by 9.5, cut the 14 inches in half to give me 2 lots of 7 by 9.5, which I'll just show you like that. And then you fold it in half and press it, and I'm going to sew along here on the fold edge, just to, like I've done here, so that it's not bagging when you open your book. So that's just a quick recap on how to measure the book. Now I'm going to show you how to cover it using fabric with wadding. So what I've done in this particular case, I've taken some scraps of purple, different shades of purple and lavender fabric that I had, and I literally just cut them all up into strips, 1 1/2 inch strips, over whatever size piece of fabric they were. I knew that I needed to end up with a piece that was 14 inches by 9.5, so when I sewed all the strips together I had to make it bigger than that and then just cut it down. And it doesn't matter whether you've got joins in. I mean, this strip of fabric here, you probably can't see it, has got a join in it. Just join all your fabrics together, and then when you think your piece is big enough for the size that you need, just stop joining everything and trim it all down so it's the right size. So this is going to be my outer fabric. My lining I'm going to use plain white like I did last time, but this time, in addition to the 2 lots of fabric and the fabric for the flaps, I've cut a piece of batting or wadding. It's quite thin, it's one of those dense type ones, and this is 1 inch shorter on both the width and the height. So this piece of wadding is 13 by 8.5, and basically I've just used some fabric spray adhesive, sprayed it onto the wrong side of my lining and put the wadding on. It will peel off, it's not, you know, like permanently stuck, but it's stuck enough that it will hold it in place while I'm putting the sandwich and everything all together to sew it together. So I'm going to just sew a line of stitching, or maybe 2, I might even use a decorative stitch on this. I'm going to have a look at my sewing machine in a few minutes. So on the folded edge I'm going to put some stitching down these 2 pieces, as I did in this one. On this one I used plain 2 rows of straight stitching, and then when I've done that I'm going to come back and show you how to put all the sandwich layers and everything together. Okay, so I'm going to sew a decorative stitch down this folded edge, and basically I'm going to line the I'll just show you. I'm going to line the edge of the presser foot up with the edge of the fabric and just sew all the way down using a decorative stitch. Now I'm using a Janome Memory Craft 9900, and the stitches that I've chosen to use for this particular piece, I've already done one piece, are stitch numbers 7 and 16. So I selected both of those stitches and I've sewn the decorative edge all the way down one, and I'm just going to do the other. Okay, so I don't know if you can see now, but that's all sewn down the folded edge with the decorative stitch. So I'm going to make the sandwich layer now. So this is the lining fabric and I've got the wadding on the back. So the wadding needs to go face down. One thing I forgot to say at the beginning of the video, but it is all in the previous video, we're sewing with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that's why I cut the wadding shorter all the way around to get rid of some bulk, because we've got the lining fabric, we've got 2 layers of the pocket, and then we've got the top fabric. So lining fabric, wrong side down, right side up, with the wadding on the back of the wrong side. Then I'm going to take the pockets, and you want to put the folded edge in towards the middle, so all your raw edges are lining up together. And again, I've got a decorative stitch here, so right side up. So that's going to line up on there like that. I'm going to do the same with this one. So the right side of the decorative stitch facing up and all the open edges together matching up over here. Like that. And then the top fabric right side down. And again, line up all the edges, make sure it all lines up. And then I'm going to pin this so that it doesn't shift when I start sewing. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave an opening in the bottom of about 3 to 4 inches. So I'm just going to use some pins and start to pin all this together. Now again, I went over this in the last video. You can use a 1/4 inch foot. You might have a marking on the bed of your machine that lines up as a 1/4 inch. On my particular machine, I know that this is the standard foot, and with the needle set in the middle, if I line the edge of the fabric when I'm sewing to the bit where the clear part starts on this foot, because there's like a silver bit on either end and there's a clear bit, if I put the edge of the fabric to where the clear section starts with the needle in the middle, that gives me a 1/4 inch seam, so I don't have to use a 1/4 inch foot. So that's kind of sometimes a bit of a tip if you've not got a specific 1/4 inch foot. So I'm just going to bring this to the machine now. Set my machine back to a straight stitch. So these 2 pins kind of help me to remember that this is the place where I'm not going to sew. In the last video I showed you that I actually put a mark with an air erasable pen. So I'm going to start at this point here, line my presser foot up, because I'm just using the ordinary foot, with the clear bit on my foot with the needle in the middle. That means I know I've got a 1/4 inch, and I'm going to sew all the way around. and you get to the corners, leave your needle down, lift your presser foot up and pivot your fabric. Just watch your pins. I know I've pinned this in all different directions, but just watch when you're sewing with the pins that you don't go over a pin or you don't stab yourself with a pin. Just coming up to the last corner now. I'm going to get to this pin and back tack, and then this will be the section that's been left open. Okay, so that's been sewn all the way around and this bit's open, and this is where we're going to turn it inside out. But before we do, I'm just going to give you the same tip as I did last time, and that's just to cut across the corners just to get rid of some of the bulk. So try and cut across the corners, but obviously as close to the stitching as possible, but not through the stitching. It may help you, you know, if your pattern's plain on one side or decorative, it may help you to turn it over and have a look. But I'm basically just going to trim the edges, and if there's a little bit of bulk on the seam, I'm just going to trim that, because sometimes your fabric will shift, like mine has here a little bit. So I'm just going to cut away some of this bulk. It just helps when you're turning it inside out, really. As long as you don't go through your stitches, you won't do any harm, because all this obviously is going to be inside. So I'm going to now put my hands in and try and get a corner. I'm going to put my thumbs in and try and get a corner and start to pull out the first corner. And just take your time with this and manipulate it through. It will come, you just have to take your time. Once I've got all this pulled through, I'll show you where we're at. Okay, so it's turned inside out now. I'm just going to take a bit of a pokey tool and I'm going to poke out the corners. And because the wadding was cut smaller than the fabric, this helps with this bit as well when you're trying to poke out your corners, because you've not got as much bulk and you can get your corners, you know, hopefully a bit more crisp. So this is how we're looking so far. Again, just go round and make sure that you're kind of rolling your seams with your finger to get all your seams out and everything. And then this is the opening in the bottom, which we're going to fold in. And again, because we haven't got a lot of because the wadding doesn't extend right to the edges, this will fold in nice and neatly. And I'm going to give this a good old press now. That's the opening there. And I'm just folding in those two open edges, and I'm going to give it a press with the iron. And I forgot to say at the beginning, but I always iron my fabrics before I start as well, because I think that helps with how it's going to look when it's finished. So I'll just give this a quick press and then we'll be back to do the last step. Okay, so that's all been pressed now. Here's the opening. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to sew with about 1/8 of an inch stitch all the way round, and that's going to help us fasten up this opening. So I'm just going to use a straight stitch. I'm going to line the foot up on my machine just to give me, I'm going to pick a spot on the foot on my machine. So if I show you what I mean. So with the needle in the regular middle position, I'm going to choose a spot. I'm going to put the fabric under the foot and choose a spot that's going to enable me to sew at the same distance, hopefully all the way round. And as I say, I'm using a straight stitch and I'm going to sew, and that will keep everything all together, but it will seal up this opening that we left in the fabric. Obviously you've got a little bit of bulk in the corners with your flaps and everything, but this also is why I cut the wadding 1/2 inch shorter, because we sew with a 1/4 inch seam when we sewed the fabrics right side together, and now we're sewing with 1/8, so we should still be able to avoid sewing through that wadding. Again, I'm leaving the needle in the down position. I'm just going to pivot. I'm just going to hand turn because I want to get as close as possible to the position where I'm sewing at an even distance all the way round. So that's probably about right. Because you have got a little bit of bulk in the corners, you may have to just push this bit through. But it will go. We're back round to the beginning now. I'm just going to stop when I get to where I started. Just going to slow down because that's it. Push that out of the way. Clip. The loose threads. And there we are, finished. So we'll take the book, open it out, slide it in. Helps if you've got a book that you can bend the back on as well. It makes it a little bit easier for getting them in these covers. But there it is, all finished. So if you follow the information that I've given you on how to measure your book and add on what I've told you to add on, and sew, you know, with the 1/4 inch seam when you're sewing your fabrics together, and then just sew with 1/8 all the way round. Don't know if you can see that, but I've got the 1/8 inch all the way along the edge, all the way around, nice and neat. It all matches up all the way around, and it fits the book perfectly, and the book can fit in it comfortably, and it fastens lovely and sits lovely, and that's with wadding. So that's another little stocking filler for somebody ticked off my list for Christmas. So I hope you found that helpful. Just recap, that's the one I did last time without the wadding. one I did originally. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you don't already subscribe to my channel, please do so, and you'll be kept up to date with hints and tips and videos when I post them. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.